Hello, I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Legislator and former Chairman of the County Board of Legislators. Welcome to this edition of Meet the Candidates. Today you'll have an opportunity to talk with the various individuals running in the Larchmont Village election scheduled for March 19th. We're joined today by Ann McAndrews, who is a candidate for mayor, and Ned Benton, who is a candidate for re-election as village trustee, and Marlene Colbert, who is running for trustee in Larchmont Village as well. And Ann, Ned, and Marlene, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
And your background and experience in the community and your current service on the village board is really part of really a long commitment to Larchmont. 24 years you've lived in the community, you've been president of the League of Women Voters, you've served in a host of different groups, including serving on the Village Planning Commission. Why are you running for mayor, and what do you think you're prepared to do, and how are you prepared to do this job?
I'm ready for this job. After all those years of various committees, and understanding why I came to Larchmont in the first place, which was I wanted a community. I wanted a community that was safe and wonderful and had tremendous community services, that was close to the city. And I wanted a community that understood that all the qualities, why I came to raise a family 24 years ago, all those qualities needed to be enhanced all the time, but vigilantly maintained. And that's what 20 years of Democratic administration has done. Through Miriam Kernan to Cheryl Louie, I will hope for sort of a seamless transition to my administration as mayor of Larchmont, to preserve what we have, to maintain it vigilantly, and to be prepared really for the challenges that are coming. And there are several of them, many of them.
You have a local law practice here in the community. Obviously, you've raised your family here. What kind of time and energy commitment does the job of mayor require in order for you to do it the way you see it needs to be done?
Well, I think what ought to be stressed is that now that I've been deputy mayor, I see the job in a different light. It's a different job from being trustee. It's a daytime. It's a day job. And not only am I just plain physically here, that's a poor qualification, but I am accessible. But through all the jobs that I've had and all the different committees that I've served on, I have stressed not only accessibility, but the ability to listen. So and to consider other people's opinions in forming my own. And that's the quality that I've been able to nurture, and I think will make me a successful mayor. I can listen, I can consider, and that's beyond just physically being here most of the time, which, by the way, I will be.
Let's talk to your colleague on the village board who's running for re-election. Ned Benton, you've been involved in this community now for 22 years, volunteer firefighter, and you have a tremendous background in a career experience in law enforcement and criminal justice system. How do the varied experiences you've had in your life come to bear in the way you've served as trustee and the way you'd like to continue to serve as trustee?
Well, as chair of the Department of Public Management at John Jay College, I oversee a faculty and a program that deals with economics and public management and justice. And Ann speaks of a seamless transition. I find that there's a seamless relationship between what I work on in my position at John Jay and the kinds of issues and problems that I'm confronted with here in Larchmont, working with the fire department, working with technology issues, working with the ambulance district, writing grant applications, raising funds for the community, working on planning projects. It's all doing what it is that I teach about at John Jay College, and that has been my experience as an administrator of a major state agency.
And Marlene, just your experiences really date back in this community since the mid-'60s, so you've been involved and seen sort of the evolution of Larchmont over a very long period of time. You've served as president of the school board, and I recall within the last 10 years, a little more than 10 years ago, very involved in a battle that was the IKEA of its day, and that's the saving David's Island from overdevelopment. What is your perspective on these things as a person who's been involved in Larchmont so deeply for so long?
Well, I have to say that I love Larchmont. And my love for Larchmont, I think, was demonstrated many times over with all the time that I gave and all the activities I was involved in. But David's Island, perhaps, was the major fight of my life. And what it involved was a group called Xanadu, which wanted to build 55-story towers on David's Island. And if you don't know where David's Island is, go to Manor Park, go to the gazebo closest to the shore club, and then look down toward New Rochelle till you find the water tower, and that's David's Island. And they wanted to build 55-story towers, a heliport, and a bridge longer than the Brooklyn Bridge from New Rochelle onto David's Island. And we organized with the help of a lot of people, organized a coalition which extended from the Bronx up to Stamford, Connecticut, and beyond, all the way around the Long Island side of the Sound, back to Queens. And in addition, my chief task was to raise the funds, because at that time the villages didn't contribute, to pay for an attorney. And we raised almost $250,000 to fight that fight, which ended finally when our then Secretary of State refused to allow the bridge, but it required a lot of work. And then I continued those efforts, obviously into the IKEA fight, and worked very hard and actually shared some of my knowledge that I gained in the David's Island fight, shared with the people at RAIN, and sat through all those hearings and gave testimony. But it was, I can look down Long Island Sound, and I have to tell you, I get a nice warm feeling to say that I was a part of that.
And all of these kinds of issues and the things that people are talking about now really change from year to year. If we were perhaps having a cup of coffee on Palmer Avenue, or those who pick up kids at Chatsworth School, they're talking about different sets of issues now in Larchmont, things that affect the people who, some of whom have been here a long time, some of whom have just moved in. Perhaps one of the ones that's gotten the most amount of headlines recently has been the decision by Grand Union to pull out of downtown Larchmont with a shopping store that everybody loved. And I enjoyed it too. It was a great place to stop in and to campaign in front of. So tell us, Ann, how this process has played out now with the CVS situation at Grand Union.
First of all, I think I was Grand Union's last customer. I hated to see Grand Union go. And with 5 children and the amount of shopping that, that I have to do, now it has literally changed my life and how I have to plan my time. I probably had to become a lot more efficient in my food shopping. So I really feel it's lost. However, you may argue against CVS as an entity. They did buy the lease fair and square at a bankruptcy sale. They are fully engaged in the process of coming in. The interesting part of this whole process is that the village owns half the parking lot. Therefore, there has to be some negotiation about rent, and with that, everything else that we can have to be put on the table as part of the negotiation. I'm part of the negotiating team, along with Ken Bialo and Jim Stout, who is the village attorney. So I'm really up to my elbows in that negotiation. It's very interesting. We're dealing with some top people that are representing CVS, but I can assure you that things like, it's not going to be a 24-hour pharmacy, a store open. When are deliveries? What about the noise from a compressor? And all those, the configuration of the parking lot are really the types of issues that we're negotiating. There's a next step to that. We are using that as a catalyst for our overall improvement of that area. Just last night at our board meeting, we authorized a landscape architect to look at that whole block from Boston Post Road up to Chatsworth School, because we are going to be having improvements on that parking lot. Well, why not at the same time improve the sidewalk along what I call the promenade across from the post office, where a lot of people are outside during the day, and to use this as a whole, to have the vision to say that this is a whole entity. Doesn't mean it all has to be the same, but it means you don't want any jarring pieces of the project. It's very, very interesting. I hope that the village will be very happy with what eventually will be that CVS area, but it also concerns the entire area, and I think it's going to be a very interesting time, and we welcome all input.
Marlene, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I would just like to say that so many people were involved in the battle to try to get a food store. I mean, you know, one of the sadnesses was that in some of the meetings, CVS indicated that they would entertain a food store there, and there were some valid proposals, but obviously in the end, CBS decided they would go there. I personally talked a great deal with people like Harold Wolfson and Ted Shear and Michael Gottfried, who were also involved in that fight, and Harold particularly worked very hard, knew some people at CVS, and is to this day extremely disappointed that there wasn't another outcome. I hope that CVS will be a good neighbor. I think we're concerned about the fact that we have 3 CVSs within a 1 or 1.5 mile radius, and what that might mean for some of the others.
Let's take this issue and broaden it to talk about the business district in general. Larchmont's fairly unique in that it almost has 2 distinct business districts, one at the Post Road and one on Palmer Avenue, and they each have different sets of needs and different sets of issues. Ned, perhaps you can address a little bit about the business district and what you've done as a trustee and how you envision the future developing within the business district.
Well, we know that our business districts on the Post Road and Palmer really are a bit long in the tooth and need some updating, and we hear that from the merchants, we hear it from residents, we heard it through the 2020 task force, and in the short run we've been focusing on simply doing better enforcement of our regulations and dedicating some village time and effort to keeping the parking areas and the business district cleaner. But we're also initiating some longer-term projects, and one of them is here. It's the grant application for $500,000 to upgrade the railroad station and Palmer Avenue neighborhood around the railroad station, and it will result in improvements for commuters. It will introduce various ways to get to the railroad station and upgrade the sidewalks and provide a lot of benefits for the area. I must say that this has been, I'd say, my signature work in the last 2 years as a village trustee. I've worked extremely hard on this. There's been about 12 drafts of this. I've gone to many, many meetings. I'm pleased to say that my opponents, they're also attempting to take credit for this work, and I think it's an endorsement of what I was trying to do when I did it. I wanted a project which had input from the village committees, had input from all of the members of the village board, residents, the Chamber of Commerce, various merchants, and I think I succeeded in that. So we have a very popular and unanimously supported proposal, and I really look forward to the chance to really work on implementing this if it should be funded.
Tell us about Larchmont 2020.
About 18 months ago, the mayor and the trustees authorized the formation of a 2020 task force whose primary responsibility was to take a look at the old master plans and to look ahead 20 years and see what Larchmont might look like, what might be needed in 20 years. One of the significantly interesting things about the whole process was how many things from a master plan in the 60s were still extant today, and that people were had many of the same interests and desires. And I guess we could put the 2020 experience into 4 major categories: open space, and along with that, access to the water; improvement in the business district; a review of the planning and zoning process; a tri-municipal technology committee. Those were the main primary topics, but then there were things like preserving the trees, preserving the character of Larchmont, but they're too lengthy to go into here. It was a wonderful experience, and I think what needs to be primarily raised is that this is not a report of the findings of the committee. This is a report of the findings of the people who live in Larchmont. We decided that we would leave out all controversial issues, all things which we didn't think there was really consensus. And the main points you'll find in 2020, which is not a long document, it can be found in the library or at Village Hall, or I'll give you one, is that this represents the desires of the community. And I'd like to be a member of the board of the village trustees to try to see that some of those things actually come to fruition. And we worked with a lot of different people, Republicans, Democrats. So it was a wonderful experience, and I'm delighted that the trustees appointed the committee.
One of the things you mentioned, Ann, I'd like to direct back to you, and that's open space. Clearly, you have 1 square mile of a community, so it's got finite resources. What kinds of initiatives in open space are possible that you think are important to see in the years to come?
Well, first of all, we're a community on the Sound, and under various state and federal mandates, there are several projects going on which everybody in Larchmont knows about. First of all, the sewers are all being relined, and pretty soon we're going to have storm drains that are going to have to be investigated to prevent pollutants from going into the Sound. The major one that everybody's going to be seeing pretty soon is a project beyond Flint Park for a large tank to be constructed and put underground in order to preserve the Sound. And thank you very much, George, for all your help in allowing us to have the wherewithal to do that. What this means is that Flint Park is going to be disrupted. So we, as a board, have to realize that the pearl in our crown, Flint Park, is going to have a major amount of construction going through it in the next couple of years. What is the park going to look like after is the subject of real concern on the part of the board, and also the possibility of extending the park and to have more fields. It's an interesting conflict conflict is probably too strong a word, but you have those who are interested in playing fields and those who are interested in wildlife preservation. They don't always come together. As a matter of fact, sometimes they can be separate. So as a mayor, it's important to understand that there are those conflicting concerns and that you have to have the reputation to be able to listen to everybody's opinion and to come to a reasonable conclusion where not everybody is totally happy, but that everybody can live with the conclusion. Next on open space is that we do have a large parcel that's for sale in the village, and there are several different parties and several different types of entities that are interested in looking at it for various, commercial versus straight open space, whatever. And this is a very, it's a very painstaking, careful, deliberate consideration that the village has to go through, because there are a lot of countervailing forces at work here. But the stress that the village is, as Larchmont 2020 said, is looking for the preservation and enhancement of its open space is a primary concern to this board, and will be on my board, hopefully with the majority of my fellow Democrats here.
Well, and certainly it's a reason that people look at Larchmont attractively. It has green space, it has a place for kids, and some of the smaller parks as well as.
And as you know, on the county level, there's a tremendous lack of playing fields. So you have the playing fields at the same time, whether playing fields can be used in these open, whether the space is available for how many playing fields is always an interesting question. And they have very strong advocates for more playing fields, all of which is really, really a consideration on the part of the village. Why I'm sort of dancing around the topic is that, like any of these things, you want to be in a negotiation, and we are also talking to various state and county agencies to help us in it. So any help you can give us, George.
Okay, well, you've got me on TV, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Public commitment to help.
Right.
One of the things you mentioned, and Ned, I'd like you to pick up on, and that is this question of improving the Long Island Sound through the way we handle some of our own environmental protections internally, highlighted particularly on sewers. Can you talk about what that represents in terms of your past experience and how you'd like to focus on it going forward?
Of course, people have seen that we've been relining sewer lines with the help of the county and the Environmental Bond Act money, and that's one way that we're trying to keep the storm sewer water where the storm sewer water is supposed to go, and the sanitary sewer water going where the sanitary
I never
water
knew
is
so
supposed
much
to go.
about sewers as I do now.
But there are a new set of regulations that are coming out having to do with how we treat stormwater, the water that collects in the street, goes down into the storm sewer, and then flows out into the Sound. And it could cost us some money to comply with those regulations, but part of the process of working on the business district grant, I discovered an earlier transportation enhancement grant that had been written for the village and the town of Mamaroneck together for more than $200,000 that was to focus on a stormwater issue that had gotten caught in a dispute about jurisdiction between the county and the state and the community. And what I've done is to investigate the status of that grant, and I've gotten an agreement in principle reflected in a letter from the town that they would agree to assign this application to Larchmont Village, and then I've spoken with the people in the transportation department that I know because of the business district grant to figure out a way to do this so we could address the problems of the grant on Larchmont streets and perhaps have a good chunk of the $200,000 left to spend on additional things we can do for stormwater. So it's an opportunity to put $200,000 to work for Larchmont.
And in
Found
the
money.
Yeah, and in the end, you get a clean Long Island Sound out of the
Yes.
process.
Absolutely.
Marlene?
I just like to jump in. My colleagues here have had the advantage and disadvantage of having to deal with the actual nitty-gritties like the SSO and sewer lines, and I can still be a visionary since I haven't been sitting on the board. And I just want to say that, you know, open space was probably the major quality of life issue that people talked about in 2020, and access to the water, and that, you know, looking at Flint Park, as Ann talked about before, the jewel of our park system, you know, maybe there's room for both the needs of the people who play games, tennis, soccer, whatever, and those who like some passive recreation, and maybe opening up the back of Flint Park, which actually sits on the marsh and the tidal zone. I mean, you could put small kayaks in there when the tides are right.
Just
and
right.
for example, if
For
you're
a
over,
moment.
Just right.
and if you're over, you have to get out before the
Yeah,
tide.
you have to get back in, too.
And you know, the same at Lorenzen Field if you stand there. And you know, all of these things are wonderful places to have cooperative efforts with the town of Mamaroneck, because in addition, one of the things that 2020 pointed out was that we have most of the open space and they have a broader tax base. And one of the ways, particularly in the area of recreation and open space, is one place where we ought to be working together wherever possible to maximize both of the land and the tax base.
Let me just ask you to say a word about IKEA. A year ago, that was the great victory of this area. So many people had a role to play in it. Marlene, we'll start with you. Anybody else? A year later, what does the IKEA victory, stopping IKEA from coming into a neighboring environment, what does that mean to the people of Larchmont Village in your judgment?
I think it's the difference between a way of life or a quality of life that was really going to be degraded because 1 million more cars are on the road, on Weaver Street, crossing the Post Road, going down the Post Road, I think would have had a significant financial impact. I think Elliot Sklar, who headed up 2020 and also testified, laid that out very well. You might not see it tomorrow, but within the next few years you would see a diminution of property values. And IKEA, it was the wrong thing. I mean, I wrote to the president of IKEA North America myself, and I said, we didn't let Con Edison build a power plant on David's Island. We didn't let Xanadu build 55-story towers, and we're not going to let you ruin our way of life here in Larchmont.
Ned, Ann, anything on IKEA? Just,
Well, I think it really represents the model for how our community can work with the communities around us to deal with these threats that happen to us. They're not, you know, there are things that we do because we decide to do them. We decide to fix a parking lot or whatever, but there are things that happen to us that we can't control unless we reach out to New Rochelle residents, we reach out to town residents, and we as residents become politically active. And I think it really sets the model for how this is to be done, and building on, of course, the success of David's Island as the other model.
When you were president of the League of Women Voters, this model of participation was created.
Well, I really wish I could totally agree with you, because I found what IKEA did is it changed the model.
Okay.
IKEA brought out people to become active in their community that had never done a thing in the community before.
Right.
The League of Women Voters is a broad-based, nonpartisan, all-purpose organization that is crying for help and more active members. What happened is that there was a threat, and the people in the community discovered that in order to maintain vigilantly their quality of life, which is sort of my theme song, that they had to go out and do something. They had to do it themselves, and within this wonderful democratic model that we have of people going out and doing things themselves, all the individuals came together in various groups and coalitions, and with the help and the money of the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck, were able to stop this. And let me stress that this board hired professionals, and we spent a lot of money. Every penny of it was worth it. But we spent $200,000, over $200,000 between just the village, and that's in addition to what the town spent. We put in innumerable hours of investigation, and I myself remember I found out that half the traffic study was baloney because they just
So is the
repeated
other half,
figures.
by the way.
Okay, they just repeated figures within
Sure.
them,
Yeah.
and it just takes a lot of work and basic digging to find things like that out. But it brought out new new members of new volunteers in our community, and we see them now. We're trying to engage them in additional issues. For example, RAIN has now taken on the issue of airport noise, and you see some of the other members of RAIN are now involved in Indian Point. It has this energized the citizenry to be active in their community, and I'm delighted they did it. I'm delighted we won, and I'm delighted that IKEA has gone away.
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to touch on a couple of things very rapid fire. Ned, talk a little bit about the technology piece of 2020, and if you would, let's talk a little bit about the fiscal situation
Sure.
of the
Well,
community.
the technology, people know about Larchmont Online. They should be interested that we're doing things like replacing the telephone system of Village Hall using a telephone that we bought from a .com that is going to save us thousands of dollars a year. But on the fiscal side, I think I can be very quick and I think the numbers speak for themselves. Sometimes there's the impression that Republicans save money and Democrats spend money, but here the dark bars are the Republican tax increases when they were the majority on the board. The light ones are the Democrat tax increases when we were in the majority. So in Larchmont, the Democrats have demonstrated that we know how to do fiscal management well.
Marlene, we touched briefly on the skies and the airplane noise. Anything you want to add to that particular issue? Because that is one that's become a more prominent issue now.
You know, I think Ned pointed out something before that I think really needs to be emphasized. There are external issues and there are internal issues. There are issues you can sort of really control yourself as a village board, and there are things beyond your control. And last night at the village board, Nita Lowy's representative spoke, and our next job, and Rain's next job, will be to try to work with the FAA to see if we can evenly distribute some of the noise that's coming right over the Boston Post Road on Chatsworth, where the planes seem to make a turn to LaGuardia, to see if we can't do something to improve that.
And let me let you have the last word. You moved to this community 1978 with your family, your young family at the time. What is it about your experience moving here that relates to people who have moved now to this community in 1998 or in 1999?
It's getting immediately active in the community through the League, which is a wonderful organization to have when you have young children. It's user-friendly. The point is that we moved here because of the quality of life. The quality of life has been maintained for 20 years under Democratic boards, at the same time while being very fiscally responsible. We haven't just thrown money at problems. It's that vision for the next 20 years, using 2020 as giving us discussion points on what to go forward with. This is what is so important. We have a vision for the future, and through all these years of experience represented by the three of us, we are prepared for the challenges that we can't even imagine now. What are the next big challenges coming along? What is the next IKEA? We are really, through all our life's experience and our community experience prepared to serve Larchmont very, very well for the next 20 years.
Thank you.